And I just invite you to get comfortable in your seat. Let the chair support you wherever you are. Feel your feet on the floor. Take a few gentle breaths. And if you haven't done so already, I invite you to gently close your eyes. Know that this is the perfect place for you to be. Right here, right now, having this experience. Know that anything I say that doesn't feel true for you will simply flow through and on out. So simply continue to gently breathe. Godness and I are one. We are one with Spirit, Source, the ground of being. We are one with divine energy that created the universe. We are one with the great mystery of life. As we allow those truths to settle in, to rest in our heart space, we can feel an expansion in our chest, around our heart. We are able to breathe more deeply. And as we breathe, we are reminded that we are being breathed by the One, by Godness. Our heart beats the divine pulse of life. And as that amazing divine life flows through us, we sense the love of Spirit realigning us, healing us at our core. The love of Godness flows freely through us and heals our minds and emotions. We observe any negative thoughts and gently replace them with loving truth. We shift our focus to the good in and around us, and our emotions gently elevate to higher vibrations of gratitude and love. I invite you to spend the next moment or so seeing in your mind's eye just some of the thousands of wonderful things in your life right now. Go ahead. See the good. No matter how upside down things in your life may appear, let us have no fear, because we know this big secret. All of creation is conspiring to shower us with blessings. We withhold judgment for what may appear to be a huge disappointment, a failure, or loss, because it ultimately may prove to be simply a clearing away of the old, a last gasp of limited thinking, which will usher in more wonderful experiences than we currently can imagine. Divine life is crazily in love with us, brazenly and innocently in love with us. The universe is conspiring in our favor. We know that God is love and has no end, and a power that knows no bounds. God's healing power of divine life is restoring, healing, and revitalizing our world in this very moment. We let go of any fears or anxieties And we affirm that all are safe and healthy and protected. We express divine godness and love in all we think, say, and do. We bless our global family, seeing radiant health, peace of mind, and abundant love expressing perfectly. We bless our global family, seeing radiant health, peace of mind, and abundant love. And so it is. So I invite you to take a few more gentle breaths. Feel that life energy flowing through you, all the way out to your fingers and your toes and the tip of your nose. And when you are ready, I invite you to gently open your eyes, feeling alert, yet relaxed, energized, yet at peace. Oh, good morning, everybody. It is so fun to be here and see your mouths. I'm just having a good time. I have not seen people's mouths for a long time. This is really good. Okay, as in my introduction, Peggy did mention I'm retired. I think it's a really good thing because I realized that my talk title will make no sense to most people. Because, 50 years ago, this month, I went to an obscure movie. And it was based on a book by Eric Siegel called Love Story. And in that book, the two characters, Jenny and Oliver, were college sweethearts. I went to see it while I was a college sophomore, with my sweetheart. Oh, it was so romantic. Anyway, but she says to him during this movie, very sincerely, love means never having to say you're sorry. Which is really, and there was a tagline that caught on, which actually was pretty good because I was a couples therapist, so it gave me a lot of work, because that is nuts. So I was thinking, so that's what popped into my mind. So the title was, love means never having to say you're sorry, and other crazy stuff. But I kind of snazzed it up a little bit, said, spiritual error thinking, crazy stuff. So, I was thinking, what are some of the other crazy stuff? Because sometimes it just comes in, and the crazy stuff in my life was my understanding of God, because my understanding of God really came from the Hebrew Bible. And if the Hebrew Bible, remember, God is a judgmental God. He's a big smiter. I didn't know when I was young what smiting was, but I knew it wasn't good. And I knew that it might have something to do with heaven and hell, which also were concepts that I absorbed in at that time, which are spiritual concepts, which we reframe them, do all these other things. But they got in there, and I had a lot of this stuff come in. And, then kind of went on and getting a little bit older, and then I got Santa Claus, and I understood that Santa was watching me to see if I was good or bad. Okay, I got God watching me, I got Santa watching me. I'm not that good. So I know that there could be some repercussions. I've got all this kind of thinking. And then we continue on over time. Then, I don't know if hopefully they don't do it anymore. Lord of the Rings was required reading in school, which told you that you were, if left to our own devices, we are inherently not so hot. And then I went to college, and of course, I was a psych major, and I studied Freud, who again, reinforcing that if left to our own devices, we're not so hot. Craziness. Absolute craziness. It took a while to get that kind of ideas out and put the new stuff in. Charles Fillmore, the co-founder of Unity, talks about human race consciousness, and it's kind of this, culture and all that stuff that tells us all these things that are not actually serving us well at all. And it reminded me of a wonderful little synopsis I got from Pam Grout in her book E Cubed. And she talks about rhinoceroses, whatever it is. Anyway, she talks about them, and she says they're actually very nearsighted. And so from 15 feet away, they can't tell if you're a human or a tree, which is good news because if you spook them, they tend to then get into full thrust forward with that giant, horn thing and come charging at you. The good news is how rhinoceri work is that once they're spooked, they go in this direction they were pointed at already, and they keep going until they're exhausted or they don't feel frightened anymore. And so the good news, if you happen to be like they're pointing at you, just jump out of the way. I haven't tested this theory, but I'm going to assume that that's correct. Anyway, and I'm thinking that our fear thoughts and a lot of erroneous ideas that I had in my head are kind of like thoughts that just keep going forever. And so when you come to unity, to find out we don't have to behave like rhinoceroses. We can change our thoughts, and we can evolve and get better ones that serve us well. So I kind of think of my fear thoughts. When I think of them, I think of a spooked rhinoceros. And the momentum is going, and I've got to it's like steering the ship. You got to give it a lot of room, don't you? Oh, I'm changing metaphors all over the place. This will be good. Or pulling weeds. Oh, we might as well get every metaphor I've got in here. But we know in unity, we talk about we create our world with our thoughts and our emotions. And and we get an energetic frequency that brings to us what we desire. Fillmore said in Talks and Truth, he says, when you pronounce every experience good and of God, by that mental attitude, you will call forth only the good. What seemed error will disappear, and only the good will remain. This is the law, and no one can break it. I like this law. Calling forth the good. And that's kind of where I got the concept this week for the affirmation, which is goodness always has our back and is conspiring for our good all the time. Always is conspiring for our good. It's always showering us with blessings. And I want to share a little story here. And this was about a young man named Doug. And he was informed that he had received a blood transfusion after he was injured in a car crash in Nigeria. And it turns out that the blood was contaminated and he developed HIV. And just one semester away from finishing law school, Doug felt he had been handed a death sentence at that time. But he decided to take control of his life, starting with his thoughts, and including a complete program of exercise, good nutrition, along with the latest drugs prescribed for him. He said, right away I began to feel hopeful because I was taking specific positive action. Just that alone was a boost to my morale, but the best part of my commitment to life was my solid, great expectation. I expected to feel strong. I expected vibrant health. I expected to be a victor and not a victim. It took incredible effort at first to push away the negative thoughts, but my commitment was so strong that staying positive got easier and easier. Although I still am not able to spell every negative thought that comes into my head, I have to say it eventually became enough of a habit that it altered my overall perspective on things. After being diagnosed HIV positive, I finished law school, passed the bar, and joined a law firm in St. Louis. I still follow my daily regime. I feel good, I'm happy, and I'm a true believer that great expectations bring great results. You want living proof? I'm it. I imagine there's some living proof in this room as well. Well, I would call Doug paranoid. Now, that's not a word, but paranoid, what's that? That's the erroneous belief that the world is out to get us, paranoid. And pronoia was penned by Robert Bresney, and pronoia is an antidote for paranoia. And he says pronoia is the belief that the universe is conspiring in our favor. I want to be pro-anoia all the time. Because thousands of things are going right all the time. I bet today you've already had hundreds of things go right. So the slide's not a big deal, It's like, we got out of bed, we woke up, yay, there's that one right. All kinds of things. I opened my eyes and all those, I'm not a scientist, obviously, those neurons and everything all work together so I can see you guys in bright color. I can see your faces. And of course, all that's happening because there's sunlight coming from a few miles out there, that is just the right distance, though, isn't it? Because if the sun was any closer, we'd be really, really hot. Or if it was a little further away, we'd be really, really cold. All these interesting things are working automatically. I don't know about you, but I've been breathing since I woke up. Actually, I was breathing before I woke up, but you know what I get. We've been breathing. My heart's, been pumping perfectly. Everything, all my systems are going beautifully, and please continue. That And that's been happening. Thousands of things have been going right since I got up this morning. The world, the universe, Godness is conspiring in our favor all the time. But I don't normally pay attention to that. Do you pay attention to your breath all the time unless you think about it and you pause to think about it or you come here? Otherwise, I just breathe. And then I get distracted by all kinds of other interesting things that are going on. But we don't have to do that. If I want to be like Doug, and I want my primary expectation that things go well all the time, and that I'm never alone because Godness is with me. And I thought of a little story, and it was about a little girl who got lost in the woods for several hours. And then finally a man discovered her sitting under a tree, just waiting to be found. She was very calm. And he asked, "Weren't you afraid?" And she said, "No, I wasn't afraid because I know God is here." And he said, "How do you know that?" And she said, "Because I'm here." Pretty wise, huh? I was not that wise when I was a little girl getting lost, I got to tell you. But she was. She knows. I just got goosebumps again, It's like, I'm here, you're here, Godness is here. It's like, this is a really very crowded room because there is so much love and Godness, that divine energy present all the time. Charles Filmer says that, we have the 12 gifts, divine gifts within us, and one of them is judgment and discernment. And he says, judgment is a faculty of the mind that can be exercised in two ways: from sense perception or spiritual understanding. If its actions are based on sense perception, seeing, hearing, all that, its conclusions are fallible and often condemnatory. If based on spiritual understanding, they're safe. So I want to be always moving my mind up to having good perception of what's going on. So I want to treat appearing setbacks, happenings that are not to my liking, as the universe still having my back and perhaps having a better idea. Because that might be what's going on there. Richard Bach, in his books Illusion, said, "The mark of your ignorance is the depth of your belief in injustice and tragedy. What the caterpillar calls the end, the master calls a butterfly." And so I have worked throughout the years to take the word tragedy out of my vocabulary. And that doesn't mean that, horrible, painful things happen in the world. But what I don't want to do is label it that is all it is going to be. I want to be able to give room for new, perfect good to come from wherever it is. And so and to me, at least for me, when I would call something a tragedy, I have now put it in a box and said that's its usefulness. It actually doesn't have any usefulness. But when I say that, okay, this, what do we call them? Sometimes we call them challenges. I'm not that fond of that word sometimes because it irritates me sometimes, because when you're in the middle of a challenge, the last thing you want to say, someone to say, is, you have a challenge. You want to go, this really is crappy. And so we honor the feeling sense, but I don't want to limit how I see what's going on. Edwin Gaines is a wonderful unity minister, and she said, "Not all our good tastes like chocolate and smells like turkey and dressing." Okay, I love her. And it's like we can claim things good even if it isn't exactly what we would have wanted. Expect blessings despite what might be going on. There's the parable about the young man who was out sailing by himself, and the boat sank, and he swam to the deserted island, and he was living there, and he was foraging for food. And then one day when he was out foraging for food, he saw smoke and realized that his thatched hut that he had built to protect him from the elements was on fire. And he was so dejected. And then shortly later, he noticed a speck on the surface of the water, and it was a Coast Guard cutter. And they came and rescued him. And he said, "How did you find me?" He said, "Well, we saw the fire that you had set." Sometimes we don't want to declare it a tragedy. We want to declare that might be the new beginning of what's coming towards us. That's why I'm a big fan when people are, we're visualizers here, and we visualize what we want. And some people, I'm a plan A person. Some people say, well, you need a plan B. I say, no, I never know on a plan B because I want to visualize plan A. Because what happens when I'm visualizing plan A, I have this great feeling. Do you have that when you're visualizing exactly what you want? Now, if you say, well, what does plan B feels like? Yeah, it doesn't feel that good. Well, since we know in visualizing, we may not get the specific of what we're looking for, but we're going to get the felt sense of what we were in. So I want the felt sense of plan A. And a lot of times what shows up may not look like plan A anymore, but you know what? It feels like plan A, even though it might have been B, C, or D. And so that reminded me of when people talk about happiness and how they pursue happiness. They say, well, there's natural happiness, and that's what happens when you get exactly what you want, plan A. And then there is what is called synthetic happiness, or I call chosen happiness, and that's what you have when plan B shows up and you choose to embrace it. And now some people will tell you that natural happiness is better than chosen happiness. But you know what? They're the exact same thing. We get to choose to be happy with whatever is showing up. In fact, there was a Dan Gilbert TED Talk, and it was entitled The Surprise Science of Happiness. And he said that if you win the lottery or become a paraplegic, these are your choices. I'm not going to have you raise your hands. I'm guessing that plan A is winning the lottery. He said, but what they found is that if you win the lottery or you become a paraplegic, that how long did it take? He said 1 year later, the level of happiness for both those folks is equal. Because you can choose to be happy regardless of what's going on in our lives. Isn't that's that wonderful freedom we have? That's why we're not rhinoceri. They have to keep running in the same direction. I can change and go, okay, I'm choosing to be happy. Any time. And they did a study of life trauma. Then they found, with a few exceptions, that whatever happened over 3 months ago is irrelevant to how happy you are today. Wow. That's good news. Isn't it? It really is. That means that there's not that much difference between wonderful and interesting. Interesting is my word for all the other stuff I don't consider so wonderful initially. But when I get a little further on, it's okay. Adam Smith, back in 1759, said the greatest source of both misery and disorders of human life seems to arrive from our overrating the difference between one situation and another. It's our evaluation of it. And there are a couple examples I thought of that were shared in. Jim Wright was a very famous politician and congressperson. And he had a lot of power and influence. He was very wealthy. And then, Newt Gingrich learned of some of his shady business deals, and so he lost all that. He lost his power, he lost his prestige, lost his job, lost everything. Very shortly later, just within a couple of years, this is a quote, though, from Jim Wright. He said, "I'm so much better off physically, financially, mentally, and in almost every way," after he lost it all. Isn't that good news? There was a gentleman called Maurice Bickman, and he spent 37 years in the Louisiana prison system for a crime he didn't commit. At the age of 78, he was exonerated because they had DNA evidence that they could now use to show that he should never have been imprisoned. He is quoted as saying, "I don't have a minute's regret. It was a glorious experience." Now, that was a little extreme for him. It was a glorious experience. But I'm thinking, I guess I'm so happy for him. Because if you're going to spend 37 years someplace, I want you to have a glorious experience. If you're going to want, don't we all? No matter what's going on. Again, I'm dating myself. Pete Best. He was the original drummer of the Beatles. That was a band a long time ago, in case those of you don't know that one too. Anyway. And he left the Beatles, and then Ringo Starr came in, and then the rest, they say, is history. And you think, well, he might have been kind of disappointed. But in 1994, he was still a drummer, and he was still a studio musician. And he said, "I am happier than I would have been if I had become a Beatle." Pretty good. So I don't think the goal here is to have riches and power and lose it all or go to prison for a long time. But it's, that we get to choose happiness in every moment. I want to close out with this one little story here. It's about a young bride from World War II. Her name was Thelma Thompson, and she went to live with her husband, who was stationed at a U.S. Army training camp near the Mojave Desert in California. And from the first day, she hated the place. She hated the dust, the loneliness, the tiny shack in which they had to live, the unbearable heat, 125 degrees in the shade of a cactus, and the relentless wind. There was no one to talk to but the native people, and they couldn't speak English. She had a powerful faith that she was in a living hell, and it wasn't about to change. Finally, she became so utterly wretched, so full of self-pity, that she wrote her parents and told them she was coming home. Her father answered her letter with just 2 lines which Thelma says will always sing in her memory, which she says completely altered her life. 2 men looked out from prison bars. One saw the mud, one saw the stars. According to Thelma, she read those 2 lines over and over until she decided to find the good in her situation. She made up her mind to look for the stars. She made up her mind to approach life with a sense of faith and trust that there was a reason for all that was happening, and that the reason at its heart was compassionate and good. Tentatively, she reached out to the natives, and to her surprise, they received her overtures towards friendship warmly. When she showed interest in their weaving and pottery, they gave her presents of their favorite pieces which they refused to sell to the tourists. She studied until she became an expert on the various forms of cacti and yuccas and the Joshua trees. She learned about prairie dogs, watched for the desert sunsets, and hunted for seashells that had been left there when the sands of the desert had been an ocean floor. The Mojave Desert didn't change. The natives didn't change. The wind still blew incessantly. The temperature continued to reach 125 degrees. And the tiny shack in which she lived with her husband was still claustrophobic. But over time, none of that mattered anymore because Thelma had redirected her faith. By redirecting her focus, she transformed a wretched experience into what she later described as the most exciting adventure of her life. Instead of wallowing in self-pity, she wrote a book, a novel about the desert, which was published under the title Bright Ramparts. And it brought her a degree of success and personal satisfaction. She looked out of her self-made prison and put her faith in the stars instead of the mud. So my wish for you this week is that as you look out, you experience millions and millions of stars. And so it is.